Good evening, this is the Painting with Commentary from the Nolzur's Marvelous Miniature Winter Wolf. Lol, it's not very much like a winter wolf. I'm GMA Tank, and this is the wolf that we painted for episode 52 of Paint to Life. Now this episode starts off with me explaining the difference of a tidally locked planet from a regular one. Tidally locked where the orbit of the planet around the sun is in sync with the orbit or the spinning of the planet on its axis. So in my story, the planet Terrestria has a side that's completely in the sunlight all the time, and that's where my creature was going to originate from. A place where the surface water is constantly evaporating, it's very deserty. So I started thinking about cactuses for inspiration, things that are both dangerous and kind of beautiful at the same time, with some pinks, greens, and of course the quills. And they're quite lethal, or at least aggravating. So let's get off to work here with my winter wolf and turning him into a desert creature on the side of the sun of Terrestria. So I'm using XPS foam just to make a base. I wanted to make like a desert dune or at least a desert hill. I decided early on when we were kitbashing this that I was going to have like a breath weapon. So I wanted him off the ground so his breath weapon would have you could see it instead of it being pushed up against the ground. So I used my knife this time instead of a hot foam cutter. I watched Leif over at Devs and Dice doing this, making some rocks, and even though it makes a hell of a mess, that stuff clings to you. It's just a little less smoky, and I don't know, I think both methods work just the same. So I sculpted that out of a knife and some XPS foam. So that gives him the height that I'm looking for his breath weapon. Now I'm going to make that base into a deserty thing. So for the first time I'm using some of this Mod Podge that I got. I watched Jeremy at Black Magic Crafts uses this stuff all the time. I like it, it's nice and runny. It's like a glue that's super runny and easy to work with. And now I'm going to apply a lot of sand from the Sahara apparently. I'm going to do this multiple times. I'm also going to add some baby rocks to it and then recoat it with sand so that it dries as like a crust when everything is said and done. So now to kitbash this as part of my challenge, I looked at all the little bitty pieces that I had. Never throw away your spare parts, you can always use them for other things. So these were the pieces I settled on. Two of these like insectoid looking arms, and of course that breath weapon from a beholder eye stalk. So using my Dremel tool, I'm going to burr little teeny holes for the arms in his shoulders. I'm going to glue them in there, but the holes are just better than just gluing it straight on the plastic. By seating it inside there, it's a nice hold, and you're not going to have to worry about it breaking off. And because there are little ball joints on the end of those arms, it was quite easy to make a round hole and fit the pieces in, a little bit of glue, and off to the races we go. Now our wolf has arms. So as I'm thinking, what is this cactus wolf? The cactus part comes later with the thorny coat, but for now, I'm drilling a hole in his mouth, just deep enough so that that little teeny projectile will fit in there nicely, and that's what I've done. Now, onto the green stuff. Now, my original plan was to give this guy like antlers. I know, weird, right? I might have been on some of the green stuff when I was working with this green stuff. So you can see me trying to use this to make antlers. Now I'm looking at a reference picture of what antlers are supposed to look like, and I'm adding a little bit of water to the green stuff to make it a little less sticky, and it sticks to my mat, but I can peel it up, and I don't know, these antlers are looking pretty festive. But you just have to work with things sometimes. Let's keep working on these antlers. So using tools to try and flatten out the ridges, and I wanted some pointy tips, which I couldn't seem to get. Every time I squish them, I use that to try and chop pointy tips. It just was not gonna work. I think if I was really to try antlers, I'd have to let that sit a lot longer to harden and then add it in multiple stages. Make a bar and then a horn and then another couple horns, and then over a process. So scrap the antlers. I thought about thorns. Since this is like a naturey beast anyways, and cactus is my jam, I thought of what rose thorns looked like and how they were shaped and how they have like a pink color to them when they're fresh, and they dry and turn brown as they dry out. So I started crafting horns on his back, and using my tool here, I'm stippling it into the fur. I'm pushing the green stuff down all around the base of the fur so that one, it sticks in place, and two, it puts these little teeny scrape lines inside the green stuff so it looks like the fur is kind of riding up the thorns. I wanted these thorns to be bursting out of its back, and they were going to be sharp and hard for protection, but also pink and fleshy looking, because I imagine that they're full of water, or water can reside inside those thorns to help the creature survive in the drought infested planet. Now also, I'm spinning here this teeny horn. I decided to give him like a, I hate to say unicorn horn, but that's kind of what it looks like. I wanted him to have like a single rhinoceros looking horn to fight with. I think my original plan was to have him channel lightning. I was going to have lightning breath come out, and that was going to be like the blue dragon, the horn that absorbed lightning. But I scrapped that early on, and I don't regret it. Left the horn though, so now it's like a ramming horn. So again, a little bit of alcohol. I squirt some alcohol on my mat, and I use this tool to just gently brush the green stuff to eliminate my fingerprints with the alcohol. And this is how he looked when he was finished. He had 8 thorns on his back, arms coming out of his shoulders, and a unicorn horn on his head. Ta-da! That's my kitbash. So now we're going to prime him using Chaos Black. I like that. Even with my airbrush, I still like the rattle can primer. One day I might prime with my airbrush, but for now, and I'm primed up. And his base coat is going to be Sybarite green. Might have spelled that wrong. Whatever that green is, mint chocolate green. So, going back with the rose theme, you know, greens and pinks can kind of go nicely together. That's why it's more of a minty green. But ultimately, this step is going to be much hidden. I mean, it's under there. It is a green wolf. But by the time this is finished, this Sybarite green is going to be all but forgotten underneath his thorns. Oh, I forgot. I also added 2 thorns to his shoulder, like his elbows. You can see them there. They're kind of inconspicuous, but they're there. That's why I'm painting around. There's those little black nubs. One of them was tricky to put in by his pose, but I thought it would be cool to have them in there again for defense. And we'll paint those up like the rest of the thorns. So at this point, the whole concept for the mini comes from the cactus-like thorns, and they come last. But you know, they're gonna obscure a lot, but it's not going to obscure everything, so you do need to paint, and you want to make it look nice, so paint it as best you can. If there's anything I did wrong with this mini, as I'll cover later, it's that I made his face green as well, and it was too much green. So all green camo for these arms. I wanted them to be green too, but not the same color as his fur. Yeah, I mean, overall I liked what I achieved with this mini from the sense of the pricklies from the spines later. But I wasn't a fan of his face. I put too much on it. I kept building up and up and up, and then ultimately I had to cheat to make some contrast, and even then it's pretty green. But they're not always 10s. And ultimately the story was a collaboration with Raquel from Rex Arts, plus the story I wrote for this episode, I quite enjoyed. So Screamer Pink, excuse me, around the base of these thorns. It's a good start. Coming out of the body, it's going to be like a burgundy pinky as it bursts through his flesh, and then we're going to go up a bit higher with another pink horror, I believe. It's coming in right now, but the title card comes later. I wet blend it with the Screamer Pink below just to get a softer transition. I don't want it to look like layers of sediment on rock. I want the lighter pink to be blended in so it's lighter near the top than at the bottom. Was it pink horror? Emperor's Children. Emperor's Children. I spelled it right. Emperor's Children, all the way to the top. Still touching and blending with the bottom. I did an okay job. Not really. Now they just look pink. But they do, once the last coat goes on, look like rose thorns to an extent, so. Okay, now it's time to do his face. I use a Karak stone, and I think there's actually, I don't think that's Karak stone there. I think that is Nurgle green. Karak stone is for his fingernails, these claws, but I think that's not Nurgle green, Niblet green from the Citadel line. I think I misclassed that. Yeah, that's what that is. So it's the first of the greens, and in his mouth, warpstone glow around the edges. Why? Because, well, lots of greens, I guess. Again, this is the beginning of my problem. In retrospect, I should have gone with like a brown or a tan for the face, something that would just look more wolf-like, I guess. I really wanted to ham the alien aspect to this guy, so he got the full weird treatment. And as you've heard me say before, if you follow my work, I always paint to the monsters manual, so I'm kind of restricted in my colors. So to be able to just pick up any old color, calabash green in those little cracks of the hands, like it was kind of fun, even though it looked like a bit of a monstrosity when it was done. You know, calabash green on his nose. Athonian camo shade goes now over top of the arms, which is like a yellow green, and Beal tan green. See, I put it on the face and I'm like, oh, that looks good. And then I put some on the body and I'm like, oh, that looks good. And before you know it, I've doused this whole wolf in Beal tan green, which is like a blue green. And because the mint in the fur is already kind of blue green, I didn't want to put a dark green or a hunter green or something that was going to make the fur clash. So by using Beal tan, I think it kept the bluey color alive instead of overwhelming it with a different color. Let me just check with my color scientist friends. Beep boop, beep boop, beep boop. I have no color scientist friends. This is just a just do it sort of thing. So with the Beal tan green in place and dried, time to do his projectile. I use Nurgle's Rot because it's glossy. I just kind of dip it in there like a booger and let it dry, hanging over a little piece of foil. I'm just spreading it out. I didn't want to globular dry. You don't want it to be somewhat translucent still. So I'm just making sure that it doesn't dry in a big, drip. And that worked out okay. So now, here he is dried up. You can see the colors in his face. Once we do, I'm like, okay, well, I need to do something to his face. I know, how about we color the teeth? Iron rack skin on the teeth, take your time. Also on the claws, because I think earlier I said they were a different color than they actually are. The Karak stone. Yeah, I think the Karak stone comes out now for those claws. So the teeth, iron rack skin is not quite a white. It's not even it's like a brown beige kind of. Made a mistake, cleaned it up. Oh, Karak stone was the tip of the thorns. You can see the thorns. I must have not filmed that. See how the thorns aren't pink anymore at the tips? They look like rose thorns, how they dry out as they age. So the tips look nice and brown and sharp, whereas the bottoms still have that pink color to them, and then the super bottom has that burgundy looking color. So I thought that looked pretty cool, even though this is a whack pot job for sure. And there is the iron rack skin, I guess, for those claws, and the claws of the feet. Iron rack for the teeth, the claws, and the hand claws. This is fun. You guys having fun? Hope everyone's having a good night. Hope everyone's safe in your family and you're healthy. Alright, time to put some tasty white glue on this guy, because now it's time to put his thorns on. So I'm using glue, not Mod Podge, because it's a little thicker and I want it to be, because I'm going to brush this all around in a light coat, and I don't want it to pool up and drip and drop. So a little bit here, a little bit there. I have this dollar store brush that I trim the bristles down to almost nothing. It's great for pushing glue into little crevices and kneading it around without worrying about it wrecking anything, because the brush is disposable. So under the tail, under the balls, oh, fun fact, I almost made nuts for this guy. What is it with me and nuts? Just like the Manticore. I actually sculpted, when I was doing the green stuff, some junk and nuts for the backside of him. I don't know what I was thinking. I must have been in a good mood. Clearly they didn't make it on the final project. So maybe some of you are happy, maybe some of you are disappointed. Maybe next time I'll do an outtake with the nuts. We'll see. So here we are, putting the glue all over. And you don't have to work too fast. It's going to start to dry because it's thin. That's all right. It can be just tacky, because the next step is where we're going to get our thorns from. Now this stuff is poly fibers. It's dead static grass from Gale Force 9. It just looks like a tan color. Now just sprinkle it over the wolf. Not too heavy. We're not trying to make him look like grass. But we're going to sprinkle this on, And then the secret tip is, I thought a static grass applicator might have worked, but no, the secret tip is to sprinkle it on, turn it upside down, and tap, 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 tap the bottom of the mini. The tapping action will make most of the stuff fall off, and the ones that don't fall off will stand upright and point in the other direction. So when you're done and it dries, it's kind of how it looks. And then I put some sand on his base to match with the sandy thing we're putting on here. As you can see, I set him on his sandy thing, and there's a so I use some white glue around the seam there, and then pour sand on that white glue there. And that all those steps that just went up on the screen, that's how I attached him to the base. I super glued him to the base too, but that's how I hid the thing, the seam. Now this is Tesseract Glow, and this is where I totally screamed his face off. I applied Tesseract Glow to his face. My family thought the face was too green, so I put a coat of Tesseract Glow on his face and then ceramite white for his eyes. So now it looks very mutated-y and bright. Now we're hitting the Mod Podge again, because it's sandy. I wasn't originally, when I did the base, I was painting or putting the sand on it to prime it and then paint it, but the sand looked really cool by itself, if not a little monochromatic, right? Because it's just sand. So I'm painting Mod Podge in a kind of random chaotic order, and I'm going to use some of this dead marsh flocking that I have, because it's like a brown red whatever. Here it comes. Marsh ground from Gale Force 9. This is going to dry as darker patches around the sand. Whether it's because it's like got some soil in it, I don't know. I always say with basing, you use your imagination. I put a little bit of gray in there too, but it's barely noticeable. And then some tufts and little stones. You have different brands of tufts. Anything, build to taste. Put the tufts on there. And then I'm going to look at it. You see how there's the two-tone now of the sand and the marsh, and they're both brown, so I kind of like the look of it. But it was a little arbitrary too. Like there's just these clumps where the marsh color is, and then the big wafts of sand. So I'm going to use some Agrex Earthshade to make some like spider webbings, but that comes later. So now I'm into the orc blood. So people in my family and friends were saying that the face is too green. I couldn't help but agree, but by this stage in the process, you're kind of committed to it. So I'm using orc blood around these thorns, thinking that it would look like they kind of burst through the skin instead of being, and it does help break up the monotony of the thorns, of the spines, so that's good. And then while I'm doing this, I even brought it out. That's Orc Blood by Green Stuff World. But I also brought their coagulated blood and blood for the blood god. You can see them on my palette there. So the Orc Blood is going around the burst marks to break up the spines. And I think that's good. Around his horn, around the spines, around the arms. And next up is going to be a little jab of coagulated blood, also from Green Stuff World. If you like blood for the blood god, coagulated blood from Green Stuff World is a great buy, because it's just as cool as blood for the blood god, but instead of drying like super red like it could be real blood, it dries more brown and muted like it's been sitting out for a while, or coagulating if you will. So I put it on his face, and I don't usually like doing blood on minis, but it needed something to break up the contrast of the, to give something else to the face. So here's the Agrex Earthshade, again, just adding to those marshy areas to make like a webby and kind of look texture in the sand. I don't know, trying to make it look a little more alien is all. By randomly connecting in a web like kind of structure the parts that were still sandy that didn't have marsh in them. And there's that. Using a junky brush because I don't want any sand to pick up and go in my Agrex Earthshade. So wiping it off each time. And finally, blood for the blood god on top of the coagulated blood, just in spots, just so it does have a little bit of red blood to it. I also put some Tesseract Glow on that Nurgle's Rot spit projectile. You can see it's got a kind of yellowy glow to it. And his eyes also got the Tesseract Glow treatment. So that's my kitbash from episode 52 of Paint to Life, the Needler. And we're going to look at some pictures. I will not lie, not my favorite mini. Had a lot of fun writing the story, had a lot of fun painting it, had a lot of fun with Raquel making the episode. Wasn't 100% with how it turned out, but I will say I do like the cactus spine effect. Using that tuft, using that polygrass. Let's look at some of these finished pictures. those do look like cactus needles, and in real life even more so. It's not soft, they're sparse enough. I didn't put so much on that it looks furry. You can see the green wolf fur underneath, but when you hold it up, it really does look spiky. It looks like it camouflages well with the ground beneath him, which would make sense being in the desert. Again, here come the pictures of his face coming up. So again, if you look at that skin, yeah, it passes for a cactus. Just say it does, make me happy. Here's his backside, sans gonads, as I said. Different color tufts on there. I think it looks alien, I think it looks like desert, and I think he looks like he's a cactus wolf. Here's his face, and the final, see how, there's a lot of detail missing there. But anyways, I hope you learned something from my trial and error, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Leave a like and comment below if you'd like. Thank you for watching Paint to Life, guys. The link to the episode is also down below. If you didn't check out the episode, you should. It's a great story, and as always, less than 15 minutes long. I'm GMA Tank. Stay safe. We'll talk to you later, folks.